Hey everybody, welcome back. We got our third lesson of C++ with my son Alex. How's it going, Alex?
Hello, doing great.
Tuning in all the way from Florida. So,
It's quite
yes,
hot out here.
nice. I wish we had some of that heat over here. It's cold and rainy and dark. Yeah, all the things I love about England.
Yep, yep.
Cool. So today we're going through our third lesson and we're going to be covering quite a few things today. So I'm going to share my screen and we've brought the notepad as well. And my drawing is terrible, but hopefully everybody can just
Please
tolerate.
welcome our new special guest.
Yeah. So so today we're going to cover quite a few different things. So we got Boolean logic that we're going to cover. We're going to cover one of the staples of coding, if statements, else if statements, and else. We're going to talk about more operators. So in our last tutorial, we talked about plus, minus, modulo, and divide. But there are many more operators that we will talk about in the future. And the ones we'll talk about in this tutorial are the less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and the exclamation point equals, which means not equal to. So those are comparing operators. And we also have what are called conditional operators for our if statements. So we have conditional and conditional or for our if statements. So I guess to get started, to break up the monotony of just going straight to Xcode, what we'll do is we will go to this my notepad, my iPad, because I love to use it, and I think it's a great way to show people how to think of some of these concepts before we actually jump into the code. So the first thing that we'll talk about is we will talk about Boolean logic. Okay, so this comes from a person, I believe, in the early 1930s called Thomas Boole, and he was one of the first to really formalize logic. And he has this logic. It's called Boolean logic. In C++, we're able to talk about whether something is true or untrue. And do you know how to declare that in C++, Alex?
Yeah, so it's BOOL.
Yeah.
Bool.
So we can use the primitive bool, so that means Boolean. And a lot of times when you're doing some sort of function or or you're declaring some sort of variable, the variable name tends to be something that has to do with what you're trying to compare. So let's say that we're talking about numbers, and let's say we want to ask the question, is this number more than 10? So we could say, is more than 10. And then normally we would set it to true or false. So true, so the word true and the word false are keywords in C++. So we might set it to false to as a default. Okay. So then what we could do is let's jump into code really quick, and I can show you a really quick example of how we can do this in code. So let's say that we have this bool is more than 10, and we set it equal to false. And then we can say, we can declare an int, so we will say int a, we'll set it to 5. Then we'll say if a is greater than 10, then what we could say is more than 10. What, Alex? What would we say there?
is more than 10, true, equals true.
Equals true. Yeah, great. So this introduces a new concept called the if statement. Okay, so the if statement is a good way for us to really talk about logic and talk about comparing things in code. So if we go back to our notepad really quick, I will go through the general kind of nomenclature of an if statement. So the way that we declare an if statement is with the keyword if, with the lowercase I. And then in here, we have a statement or some sort of comparison. And then we have a function body. So we have the curly braces. And then what we could say is if this statement is true, then what happens is it executes code. Oh, it executes this code. And we close our curly brackets. Now, let's say that we wanted to make two conditions. We have an if something happens, if this statement is, if this thing is more than 10, do this thing. If it's less than 10, we want it to do something else. So we have this other concept that's called else if. So we can say else if, and we put another condition in there. And we, once again, open our brackets, execute the code, and then close brackets. And then we have another, and then we have a final concept called else. So if it doesn't meet the first statement or the second statement, then we have the else statement that will execute. I'm always terrible at, and we'll just call this like a bailout statement. Okay. So any questions about that, Alex?
Yeah, so it sounds like, from the way you're describing it, that if we have an input, right, and it doesn't meet the first condition, then it'll completely skip the code and go to the next condition. And if that condition isn't true, in this case, condition number 2, if that isn't true, then it'll skip that one and go to else.
That's correct. Yeah. So like you said, Alex, what it'll do is it will go to the first condition and it'll say, is this true? And then if it is, then it'll execute this code inside. So we could just say yes here. And if it's no, then we go to the next statement. Right? Then we say, is this true? Oh, my handwriting's terrible. Sorry about this. Is this true? And then if we say yes, I keep on writing the wrong letters. Yes. Then we execute this statement. And if it's no, then we go to else. Else is our bailout. Okay?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Great. So let's go back to our code. So I think that I didn't properly introduce the more than concept to you earlier. So I introduced the if statement. So tough to introduce one of these things without introducing the others. So, so what you see here, this little Alex calls it an alligator mouth or arrowhead, is another concept. So we have this this concept of greater than, less than. So I'm going to assume that people know the basic math operators that you would see just in grade school, where the A is asking if A is more than 10. Then you have the less than operator. Okay, so what I could do is I could say, what here, Alex?
So else if
Else if
A is less than 10.
less than 10. And then now we would say is more than 10 equals
False.
false. Right? Then we have our bailout. So if it's not greater than 10 and it's not less than 10, then
It must be 10.
yeah, it must be 10. So then we would just say the input is 10. Great. So then we have the additional caveats that we can put on these, which are equals, right? So we could say is greater than or equal to 10, right? And then you have less than or equal to 10. That wouldn't make sense in this particular situation because you don't want a situation where it could be equal to 10 in both situations.
Right.
Or maybe you do, I don't know. But that's just to show you that that's another way if you want to express if something is greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to the number. So then you have that. So greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Then we have not equal. So they have the exclamation point with the equal sign. So this is just looking at these two values and it's saying if A is not equal to 10, then you could just say maybe C out this value is not 10. So that's the not equal to. So we got greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to. And then we have what's called comparison, conditional and conditional or operators. Okay, so what that means is that we can actually compound, we can actually do two statements or like multiple statements, like many statements chained in a line. So I could say if A is not equal to 10 and A is greater than 0, then what happens is that in order to execute what's inside the body of this function, it has to meet both of these conditions. Probably better if I actually draw it out. So there's a great way that I could do this here. So that may make a little bit more sense. So let me just unlock my iPad. So here we go. So let me just go to a new page. Okay, so let's say we have these two things. We have A and we have B. And so you have the AND operator. I can't do the ampersand. Let me try to do it. Something like that. It's terrible. but the ampersand is double ampersand is what I'm referring to. I'll try to do two of them. Looks like two G's, but those are supposed to be ampersands. Then we have the or operator, which is two lines. Okay, and so what that means is that we could do an if. Once again, this has to be a lowercase I. So we say if a, and then, sorry, ampersand, and b, then what that means is that, and then we could do some code here. So what that means is that if you think of A and B kind of over top of each other like that, like they have some sort of mutual data that, so it's saying if it meets both of these conditions, then execute this code. And if it doesn't, then it just bails out and it goes to the code that's beneath this code. Okay, then you have the A or B. So that would be more like this. So if I said A, and then we have B, and there's some sort of mutual area, it's basically saying everything in the, oh, sorry, this is terrible. A, then we got B, and then basically it's saying that it's all this area, but not the data that, but not the area that's shared between them. So it's saying it could be either A or it could be B, but it can't be both A and B, right? So going to another page, we would say if A or B, then we got some code, and it's saying if it's A, then execute the code. If it's B, or if it's B, execute the code, right? So like let's try that in some actual code now, so I can stop fumbling through this explanation. So we just did one that's with the ampersand, and I need to learn how to actually draw these. So if this one's, it says if A is not equal to 10 and it's more than 0, then it'll execute this code. So is 5 not equal to 10? What do you think, Alex?
Yes, it's not equal to 10.
Yeah, so if 5 is not equal to 10 and 5 is greater than 0, so in this scenario, this code would execute. So this value is not 10 and is greater than 0. Okay. So let's do a or statement here. If A is not equal to 10, or let's do if A is equal to 10, or A is equal to 75, we could say you pick the right number.
75 is a nice number.
Pick the right number. Else, and then we could say something like, sorry, bad luck. Right? So we'll just see what happens here. I can get rid of this. So we'll set A to 10. It says you picked the right number. I set A to 9. You got sorry, bad luck. Okay. So saying if it meets one of these two conditions, right? So it can't be 10 and 75 at the same time, right? So if it meets one of these conditions, then it will execute the code that's inside the brackets, or it will go to the else. So we could also do else if, right? A is not equal to 60. And then what happens is that, so we'll do equals and we'll say, we'll just do this. You won the jackpot. How's that sound? You won the jackpot. Then if none of those conditions are true, then nothing happens, right? You don't get anything printing out because none of the conditions are met, right? So, but if I said not equal to 60 and put that in, then we have you won the jackpot because 9 is not equal to 60. Okay. Any questions there or anything to add, Alex?
Yeah, so you briefly touched on it. A cannot be equal to 10 and simultaneously equal to 75. Mm-hmm. So if we add an AND operator there, what would the code actually do?
I don't believe it lets you actually execute ORs and ANDs in the same statement. So let's try that. I think I've tried this before, and it didn't.
I mean, if you replace the OR statement with an AND statement.
Oh, yeah. It'll just, so let's do this first, right? So a couple little rules here. So first thing is you don't want to mix ands and ors in the same if statement. It'll give you a warning. Okay. So the second thing is that you want to make sure that each one of these things is its own statement. Okay, so you can't have A double equal to 10 or double equal to 75. Like that. That won't work, right? So each one of these is its own statement. Another thing that I want to say that I've actually forgotten to say is that this is double equals. So you have double equals, which should actually be another operator here. So double equals is actually another operator to compare two values. So one equal is assigning the value to the variable on the left. Two equals is comparing the two values. Okay, yeah. So don't do this because that does not mean the same thing, right? So something like this. If A equals 10, then it says using the result of an assignment as a condition. See, using the result of an assignment. So remember how I said one equal sign is an assignment as a condition without parentheses. So you don't want to do that. So you want to do two equals like that. That compares A to 10 to see if it's equal. Okay. So, and you did briefly say something about two conditions. So let's say that A is less than 0 and A is greater than 10, right? So we will see that it actually gives you a warning here, interestingly, that code will never be executed. It knows in this case that A cannot be less than 0 and greater than 10 at the same time. Okay, sometimes it didn't. We did this earlier, and it didn't actually give us a warning.
Yeah, that was very strange.
Yeah, but yeah, you can see that it actually gives you a warning that this code that a cannot be less than 0 and greater than 10 at the same time, right? So another one final thing that I'll show you is there is a shorthand way to do simple if else statements. So this is a little bit more kind of intermediate or begin not really intermediate, but it's something that maybe you don't learn at the very beginning. So you could do like bool is greater than 10 equals and then this shorthand way that you'll see once you start looking at code bases in like kind of production code is it will say the value is like let's say a is greater than 10 and then you'll have a question mark and then it will give what happens if that condition is true and then you have a colon and then this is the else statement if it's false. Okay, so this is what is so this is a shorthand way of doing an if or else statement. Something that's a little bit, I wouldn't advise on really using this until maybe you get a little bit more experience with if and else, but this is something that you will see in code in the future. So it just, once again, going into it, says, is A greater than 10? So I'll write it the long way here. If A is greater than 10, return true. This will give me an error because it's not inside a Boolean. Else, return false. Okay. So this on line 14 and what you see in 16 to 23 are actually the exact same thing. Okay. Have you ever seen that before, Alex? You have not.
A little bit, but I've never used it.
Yeah. So you'll once you get a little bit more experienced, you'll be flying through that. You're like, I don't want to write this whole if else statement business. Another thing that I can show you is that, and once again, maybe this goes a little bit more advanced, and maybe not best. Some people would advise against this, especially when you're starting, but I'll show you it because you may see it in code bases, is that if you're doing a one line of code that's going to happen if something is true or false, then you don't actually have to explicitly use braces there. So you can do this as well, where it's just like that. But I think, especially a lot of times, I don't know. I switch back and forth. Actually, my tastes kind of change. I like the idea of not having the braces there, but it can be confusing, because then if I want to add something like this, like let's say another line of code. So let's do more code. So let's say this was another line. I don't like the look of this, like where one has the braces but the other one doesn't. That's just my style. Yeah. And once again, like space, I like space. I love space. But if you come from a world like Python or something, another language, then you'll see this as well, where it's like it's all jumbled together. I don't really like that, but that's just my style. Great. So I think that's everything. Is there anything else that we need to cover here, Alex?
No, maybe just some application.
What's that?
Maybe just some application of all this.
The application of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You want to do another example?
Yeah.
Yeah, another quick example. So, so we did grade point average before the call. So let's let's do grade point average, right? So let's say if we have int grade point average, and then we could set this to 0.0. So we'll go on a 4 point grade point average, which you would see in
Should be
some
a float.
universities. What's that?
Should be a float.
Oh yeah, good catch. Should be a float. I need to watch out for you. So great. So we got float, grade point average. So we could do just some statements here, just to define if the person is getting good grades or not, right? So let's start out the logic. So how should we start out, Alex?
Okay, so let's go from top to bottom, from A to F. So
Okay.
the first, you would say if
Yep.
GPA is equal to 4.0,
Yep. Why are we using two equals there?
because because we're not assigning a value to GPA, we're comparing it to
Yeah.
another value.
Right. So we're comparing and we're not assigning in that situation. So
Curly
if G,
brackets.
yeah, what do we want to say there?
The student has perfect grades.
Has perfect grades. Great. And then what do we want after that?
Okay, so we can say else if
Yeah.
GPA is greater than 3.0, or actually greater than or equal to 3.0,
Okay.
and is less than 4.0.
Yeah. So GPA
GPA is less than 4.0, you're right.
less than 4.0. Okay. So this is good because because it has to meet both of these conditions to execute the code inside from 19 to 21. So what will we say there?
This student has great grades.
Has what?
Great grades.
Great grades. Great. And another thing that I can point out for you is that very quickly you can actually nest these inside each other. So you can put if statements inside of if statements. So we can do something like this: if GPA is greater than greater than or equal to 3.5. We could say this student has nearly perfect grades. Has nearly perfect grades. And then we would do an else here. And then we'll execute this. So you could do if statements inside of other if statements. Okay, so let's continue on here. So we have three
So
to
now else if GPA is greater than or equal to 2.0,
yep,
and GPA is less than 3.0,
yep.
then a student has decent grades.
This student has decent grades. Great. And then else if.
Yeah.
And then let's see, I can finish this off here. So let's do if it's less than 2.0
Mhm.
and if it's greater than
0.
0, then what would we say here?
The student needs tutoring.
The student needs tutoring. Okay. And then we could say, we could do one more else if, right? So let's do an or here. So we could say GPA. Oh,
You forgot the if.
GPA.
We could even just leave it as an else, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I thought. Yeah. So I thought, or maybe we could do it as a separate if statement. If GPA is less than 0.0, or if GPA is greater than 4.0, then we can say this is an invalid grade. Okay, so that's a way that we can just nest these inside of each other. So let's just try these really quick, right? So we got 2.0, the student has decent grades. We do 3.3. So let's test out our little nested statement here with 3.7. Student nearly has perfect grades. Let's try an invalid input and see what happens there. This is an invalid grade. Great. So anything else there, Alex? Anything we missed?
no, I think we covered everything.
Yeah. So yes, that's really it. Like I said, there's quite a bit to get through there. Biggest piece of advice I could give you is just practice, practice, practice. Right? You will get these over time, and they will become natural. They will become very natural to you. Biggest thing when you're reading through this is just going from top to bottom, really just looking and saying, okay, if the GPA is equal to 4.0, and what I love to do, I love to write when I'm going through code and I'm learning new coding concepts. I love to write these things down, and I just really like to write them down and go through the logic one thing at a time. So remember, if it doesn't meet the condition, then it skips through and it goes to the next part. If you have an else if, then it goes and it looks into this condition, and then if it doesn't meet if it doesn't meet both of those conditions, it keeps going down, down, and down, right? So great. Well, that was really fun. Yeah, you enjoy that, Alex?
Yeah, that's incredibly useful.
Yeah,
Incredibly
cool.
useful for all programs.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is good. So, yeah, that's where we're going to end this tutorial. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to like it and be sure to subscribe. Give it a thumbs up.
Hit the like.
Yeah, hit the like, pound the like button. Yeah. So, and in the next tutorial, we will talk about another staple of coding, which is loops. So we'll talk about for loops, while loops, and for
All right.
now, we will let you be, and we will see you next time.
See you later.
See ya.